Turkey's jets are pounding supply lines of the YPG terror group in northern Syria, and its troops are moving along with Syrian rebels to establish a 30-kilometer deep safe zone along its southern border. Ankara says Operation Peace Spring is a national security imperative, and NATO officials agree.
Turkey has legitimate security concerns. No other ally has suffered more terrorist attacks. No other ally is more exposed to the instability, violence and turmoil from the Middle East. And no other ally hosts so many refugees from Syria. Nevertheless, I expect Turkey to act with restraint and in coordination with other allies so that we can preserve the gains we have made against our common enemy, Daesh.
But many of Turkey's European allies oppose its actions. Germany, France and the Netherlands have stopped weapons sales to Ankara. And EU members are considering more punitive measures, including sanctions on Turkey's energy sector.
I do believe that the possibility of arms embargo should be on the table, and I also do believe that this is something that we need to discuss very seriously. Are we going to achieve that? This is another question, because it's always not easy to find agreement immediately among 28 member states.
Since the fighting began, Washington's pulled its troops from the region, and it's threatening to impose sanctions on top government officials, fuel purchases and defense transactions.
Just spoke with President Trump. I applaud his decision to work with Congress to stop Turkey's aggression in Syria through crippling economic sanctions. This decision by President Trump will be a game changer in all the wrong ways for Turkey.
The threat's drawn a sharp rebuke from Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
NATO müttefiki olan bir ülkeyiz.
We are a NATO ally. Please note that these countries are all NATO members. We are at the moment under the pressure and harassment of a terror organization. Whose side should they be on according to Article 5? They should be on our side.
Ankara plans to resettle more than 1 million Syrian refugees in the safe zone, and it says the fight will continue until its objectives are accomplished, regardless of the cost. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
For more on this, let's speak to financial columnist Taha Arvas, who joins me here in the studio. Taha, we have heard this threat of sanctions so regularly, it seems, from the President of the United States. How seriously do you think markets are taking this latest threat?
Not really. I mean, if we look at the movements in the Turkish lira versus the U.S. dollar, the lira is down less than 1%, which is within its daily volatility range. So markets have kind of brushed it off. I don't think they think it's as serious as they think, as the tweets or his words may suggest.
And why? Why is it that we're not seeing such a huge kind of impact? Is it that we hear it too much?
I mean, we've been hearing it every day for a few days now. I think the other things that Donald Trump is saying are more important. In the same tweets or in the same few words, he says that Turkey has a right to protect itself against terror attacks. He talks about how those that the United States has talked about being allied with them are now purposefully releasing prisoners from ISIS, which is ridiculous. Like, how would anyone do that? And he says it's because he thinks that they think they'll get the U.S.'s attention, and so those things show that he knows what's going on in northern Syria, and that he understands what's going on, right?
We have, though, had senators like Lindsey Graham saying that they are taking this very seriously. They're going to push ahead with new legislation to enact these sanctions. If we did see the sanctions come down hard on Turkey, what would you expect them to look like?
I think they would be symbolic, and I think they would be very limited, because as the President of the United States, who has the final say here, has said, this is an ally who's fighting a terror group, and it's doing what it has to repatriate the 4 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. These people need to go back to their country. They want to go back to their country, and Turkey isn't about to just send them back to a violent war zone. So this is what the safe zone is all about. And the United States is on board and has been on board for several years now. So I don't think the talk of sanctions will be more than anything symbolic.
He has been criticised, the US president has been criticised domestically and from his international partners in some corners because of his decision to pull out of northern Syria. So do you think that perhaps this bold show of threats is a bit of bravado? Is it a distraction?
It could be his attempt to to mitigate for that. I mean, so he doesn't look weak at the same time it's an interesting time that we live in which a president or of a country is ridiculed or is criticized for pulling troops out of somewhere. This thing about not being in forever wars is something I tend to agree with. I mean, if you can't be somewhere forever, the U.S. can't be everywhere, or any military force for that matter, forever. So I think this might be kind of mitigating those things by, at the same time, saying this is a show of force. We're going to be very powerful with our sanctions. So that's what I think this is, really.
And you have said that the movement that we've seen in the lira is within its sort of daily volatility range. But if this tension between Turkey and the United States continues, do you think that will weigh on the lira?
I mean, if the sanctions are worse than other economists, the consensus has come to arrive at, then I think we may see something a movement that's more than what we've seen in the past. But I think it'll still be very limited. I mean, Turkey has been under so much pressure recently, and the economy and the lira has performed much better than it would have a year ago or 2 years ago with such open threats against the economy. So I don't think we'll see nothing like we've seen in the past.
And what about oil? We've seen this sort of situation that's happening on the border has sort of weighed a little bit on oil and commodity markets. What do you think, the longer that this sort of intense escalation of conflict happens along Syria's border, what impact are we going to see on commodity markets?
I think it's very interesting to watch. I mean, the narrative is that northern Syria is a potential pipeline for Iraq, Iran to get their oil to the Mediterranean, bypassing Turkey altogether. And this is the whole reason why this whole conflict is happening, is what people think about. So it's interesting to see Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, all in bed together with Russia and all these other groups. I think it's all about oil, frankly, or it's mostly about oil. And so we'll see how markets react as things play out. But at present, it doesn't appear to be a much wider conflict. It should be really restricted to the area we're talking about.
It will be an interesting one to watch, to see how those commodity markets react. Taha Arvas, always wonderful to have you on Money Talks. Thank you.